1970s, it would burn through 130 acres. Temperatures underground would hit more than 900 degrees and burn through more than just the coal deposits.
Years ago, Frank Howard, the mayor at that time, told me and others that it was actually the rock that was burning, that the fire had gotten so hot that the rock itself was burning.
Frank Howard was mayor in Carbondale from 1960 to 1968.
There was times in the digging out of this mine fire that the heat in the pits where the men worked was so hot that they just couldn't stay in there for maybe an hour at a time, and they had to get out and then get back. We were told that what was burning at that particular time was rock. Now this proved to be a fact later on, because the rock would get red hot, molten lava hot. The coal, it seemed, never burned. They told us that it was so compressed that it didn't get air and it wouldn't burn. But the rock actually burned. And the fire, the flames at night lit the sky. I mean, you could actually see the reflection of the fire from the pits, which was down 100 feet at places, and someplace either lower than that.
Carbondale asked the federal government to help. It tried flushing the area, shooting dirt and water underground. The fire was even declared out in 1951. But then tragedy hit. 2 elderly people died in their sleep of poisonous gas.
In the earlier years, in the early 1950s, before they really got down to business of putting it out through stripping, the fire would burn beneath these homes. And as any coal fire burns in the house, it would release carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, which are poisonous gases. These gases would seep up through the ground and into homes through cracks in cellar floors and so on. Or some of these homes probably didn't even have concrete floors as we would think of today. They would just come up through the ground. In November 1952, Mr. and Mrs. Patrick Collins were found dead in their home by their nephew. So those were the only 2 recorded deaths attributed to the mine fire. But there were many close calls, because all during the time that the mine fire raged on during the 50s and early 60s, the U.S. Bureau of Mines would have inspectors making rounds throughout the fire area, checking gas levels in the basements of these homes. More than once, these mine inspectors found people unconscious and dragged them out of their homes, or found the levels of gases high and got the people out of their homes before something would happen to them.
They claim that this was caused by the fact that the gas burning underneath couldn't escape. So it just followed crevices and eventually came up into the cellars of the homes there, so that the state had to appoint state inspectors, who was headed by Jim Munley from down around Archibald, I believe he was from. And he put men on, and they checked these homes every hour. They went into the cellars and they checked the homes every hour for carbon monoxide gas.
The death of the Collins and the expense of the Carbondale mine fire focused national attention on this small town of 11,000. This article appeared in Popular Science magazine. This one, titled Town on a Hot Seat, was in Pageant magazine in 1957. CBS Radio carried the story. So did the New York Times and the Saturday Evening Post.
Okay, this is from the Saturday Evening Post, September 1963. This tells of Santo Perry, who related this story, and I quote, "My son Bob, he was just 5 years old then, had come into the backyard with a pitcher of lemonade my wife had made. As I took it, Bob screamed, 'Daddy, the ground is falling.' I looked down and I didn't know what to think. The ground was opening up under him. I grabbed him by the shoulder and threw him behind me. Everything went down and it kept going down and down. I flung myself back away from the hole and clawed up the bank. When I went down, this debris and thick yellow smoke and flame came up out of the hole. Some men up on Willow Avenue about a half a mile away saw it and thought the house was on fire. Afterwards, he says, "Mother of God, we could have all been cooked alive."
Eventually, the federal government agreed the only solution to the fire was to dig it out. 1,300 people had to leave their homes. Stores, taverns, even the old Wilson School had to go.
It seemed at that time that the fire was actually getting away from us. It had killed people, and it got to the point where the carbon monoxide gases in the homes was too much to stand, so we had to try and buy the properties and move the people out. This was the saddest thing of the whole project, to tell these people who had lived there all of their lives that we were taking their homes.
To help pay the enormous cost of digging the fire out, the decision was made to sell any coal salvaged from the mine fire area.
What they did, they convinced the government that they could dig it out and sell whatever coal was usable, because I imagine there was some coal that was burned. It had to be, it was obvious, and sell what coal was usable, and the coal company would pay the city or the federal government a royalty of that time of 22 cents a ton, and that would go towards reimbursing the government for its expenses in digging out the fire.
The digging actually began in 1960. Huge trenches were built around the mine fire to stop it from spreading. Steam shovels and drag lines dug out hundreds of millions of tons of burning rock and loaded it into trucks. The material was then taken to another area and spread on the ground until it could be doused.
The shovel operators and the equipment, the trucks, taking the material out of there that they were digging out, we had to have water pumped on the trucks to keep the trucks from burning, to sort of kind of cool it off till they could take it out of the area and spread it around.
These mountains of rock and dirt are what's left of the Carbondale mine fire. They were literally created by the crews that dug out the burning coal and embers. Hundreds of tons of debris just piled up here as a reminder of the massive effort that took more than 2 decades. And there are some other reminders as well. Look behind me, you'll see these pipes sticking out of the ground. These are boreholes that were put in by mining officials just recently. There was some evidence that there was still a fire burning underground. And even though they considered it not to be a threat because there wasn't much left to burn, they put the boreholes in to measure the temperature underground just to be on the safe side. There are other reminders of the fire as well. These old trucks, abandoned, rusting like old dinosaurs along the dirt road. An old drag line sitting in a field that once looked like hell. But Carbondale's mine fire was conquered, and many of these people who live and work along Brooklyn Street now have forgotten that nightmare. In fact, Carbondale has turned the tragedy into a victory of sorts, reclaiming the land that once challenged the future of the pioneer city. I am grateful to all the people who helped explain the mine fire's history, and to Robert Powell and the Carbondale Historical Society for helping in all of the research.